How about Bahamas? Indiana basketball going to the Bahamas. That announced today. What was that? Day before yesterday that came out originally, but they're playing 2 games down there, but they're not televised. I can't comprehend how someone would not find a way to televise these games. I just can't see that there's not money to be made. But kind of odd, but they're going to the Bahamas. A big change. That's more stuff with Mike Woodson getting it going. And it just continues to show how this is just a whole new day in Indiana. I mean, the last 4 years, you might as well, as hard as it is, just wipe out of your mind, because that's going to be a distant memory very soon. I truly believe that in what they're doing there under Mike Woodson.
Yeah, and, it's interesting. I had a recent conversation this morning with Charlie Miller, your co-host. I'm working with Storyham, and I asked him a little bit about Mike Woodson and having an Indiana guy at the helm, and he said he felt like the Board of Regents has spoken in that being necessarily the former players, the fans, kind of a referendum to bring in someone with Indiana ties, and I think it has kind of boosted the morale around there a little bit. And certainly making the investment for this international trip, their first international trip since 2014 when they went to Canada. And there's a lot of value in those trips. If you remember that documentary in February about the big trip back in 1985 when, Bob Knight sent his team around the globe, basically. That was a much longer trip. That was about 28 days, a month. But to be able to have that bonding experience and also to have the extra practice time, even in Bloomington, you get, I believe it's 10 days, and how they'll divvy it up in that 6-day trip is they'll probably do a few practices at the Cook Center to start out, and then you go out to the Bahamas and you practice and you play those exhibition games. So I think it's going to be really good for them in terms of implementing their system and, developing a little bit of growth and continuity, because you have basically, 6 returning players and 6 new faces, and you've got to, gel and blend that together.
Yeah, if you recall a while back, not too long ago, we saw the 1985 trip taken by Bob Knight and his team. The only trip of that sort ever taken by Bob Knight. But we saw what that did for that team. That was in 85. 2 years later, that team wins a national championship. And if you go back and watch that, a lot of the guys that were on that trip said that trip went a long way in leading to that. It's investment. You're putting an investment in. Here's what you're doing, basically. You're investing in these guys, these personalities, and getting it all together. And yeah, the faces will change next year, but once you get this system going, I'll just call it a system, but once you get that going, you just keep moving in the parts and it doesn't change. But the system has to be changed, and that's what Mike Woodson and company are doing right now, and they're doing a hell of a job of it because they've done it like that. But that's what happens when you know what you're doing. And when you put people in place that know what they're doing, they get the job done.
What did Tom Crean's trip in 2014 do, I wonder? I mean, did they have a good year in 15 or 16? 16 is what it all kind of came on the rails, but I think immediately in 14 and 15 there were decent seasons.
Right.
Were they not?
Well, I have to go back and look. They won a Big Ten championship toward the end, but it was the immediate future. It was like boom, there was nothing there. It kept dropping off because Crean would over recruit, and there just wasn't the continuity. He lost the Indiana coaches and players, so that was changing. Hey man, my cousin's on. So that was a big difference. And that's why he kind of went off the cliff. He lost the Indiana coaches, lost the Indiana players. And so now when you rely only on outside guys at Indiana, that's problematic. This is not a place where you rely on the outside guys. You bring them in to enhance what you have. And he had lost that. So, but this is getting back to the basics of what they have always done, and it works, and it's going to work.
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering because, when you talk about that 85 trip, that was 28 days, and now it's more like 10. So I think the difference in the bonding, do you have as much, time to bond, and does that, have a direct correlation? I just think it's a win-win, though, because especially with a new coach, you want to have that time. You want to be able to build that system. But for it to happen overnight, maybe it won't, but maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, too, that'll be helpful. And, maybe the exhibition games are a time when you can tell a guy like Trace, hey, you can step out a little bit and shoot from 10, 15 feet, or have Race Thompson take a few three-pointers and try to build his confidence that way and stretch the floor. Things that, Mike Woodson wants to develop and wants to implement in order to open up the floor a little bit. You can try out in some of those games because, even if you lose to a team, of that caliber, which is they're a high-level European club team. I mean, Goga Batadze, Nika Jovic, they all came out of that program. So it's not going to be a walk in the park by any means. But I think you can test some things out as well in some of those exhibition games and see how things work and see if you can implement some of the things that long term are going to be successful to your program.